Two, check. Hello, two. Two, what's up?
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Good to see you, Rob. Is your new co-host behind and slightly under you?
Contrast going here. No, Praxid, thanks for 26 months. Tier 1. Thank you, Praxid. We're not doing the chair thing, okay? We don't have time for this today. We don't have time for any of this nonsense. I'm late getting started here. We're not doing the chair bit, okay? It was fun. We all had a good time. We all had a good time doing the chair bit yesterday. Ah, crap, I didn't reset the subs. Don't worry, I'm not going to scam anyone here. Make sure we get that one in there. Good. That's done. Good, alright. How are you doing? How's everyone doing? What's up? How are you folks? I'm sorry, I'm getting late. I'm late getting started here. I was in kind of a bit of a, just busy this morning trying to, we got all kinds of stuff planned. We got to plan this summer with my son here and figuring out all the logistics of what's going on this summer with when he's going on vacation and where and with who and when he's in camp and all this stuff. Figuring that out today. Quite confusing. In fact, I know I've been talking a lot about going to the DNC, but I don't think it's going to happen, realistically. Realistically, I don't think this ambitious plan for me to go to the DNC, which I do want to do as like a journalist here, but I don't know if it's going to be possible. I think it's too complicated for me to leave at that time. I know. I really would like to do it. I would like to go as like a journalist. I would like to be able to meet people. It would be really fun to like be there, but I just don't think I can do it. I don't think I can do it. He's going to be in camp around that time, and I'm going to need to like be able to be around. Sounds like they're going to make it online anyway, which is hilarious if they do try to do that. Either way, I'm sure there are going to be protests in Chicago, whether they show up to the fucking DNC or not. There's going to be protests there. When I was a kid, I went to deaf camp. I'm in a wheelchair. My mom signed me up for wrong disability. Oh no. Oh no, Serafina. That must have been an interesting experience, though. Yeah, no, it is a total logistical nightmare, risk inverse, and there's all kinds of personal dynamics trying to navigate for the first time right now, which I don't need to get into the details of. It's just a lot. It's really a lot. Like, I am going to have to take a bunch of time off from like doing this stream. I'll probably try and have some kind of a summer schedule thing, so I'm not missing like entire weeks. It's a nightmare. It's going to be a nice summer. I'm looking forward certainly to being able to take a little time off and to spend time with my kid. I'm going to go see my mom and my brothers, and I'm going to bring him all around all over the place and go mini golfing, get ice cream, and do all that fun stuff. So looking forward to all that, but it's also going to be tricky to like take time off from doing this. This is my main source of income, and when I don't do this show, I don't have income, so that's a bit of a problem. But I will figure it out. And yeah, family first. That's the way it goes. I'm sorry, Johnny. I'm sorry. I was honestly, I really wanted to make this happen, and I just think it's going to be too tough. He's going to be in camp that week, like right next to where I live, and it's not going to be conceivable for anyone else to like pick him up. I will try to do it. Listen, I will. In all honesty, I was a little nervous about going to America. And like, listen, I know I'm not a big deal. Who cares? It's just Rob Rousseau, right? It's just 50-year-old blogger Rob Rousseau. No one cares. But with the climate that's going on right now, I just felt like I was genuinely getting a little weirded out about going down to the DNC and being like, oh yeah, I'm a journalist, I'm gonna go cover there, and then end up in some fucking back room at the airport with some ungodly 3-letter agency psycho questioning me. It probably wouldn't happen. Most likely it would not. Again, I'm not claiming to be some big deal. I'm not claiming that anyone like knows who I am, anything like that. You never know though. If they decide to Google you, they might see some shit. Especially I was seeing all these reports of like prominent journalists and historians being like detained. Prominent Israeli historians being detained, asking if they support Hamas and stuff like that. Everyone knows Canadian bloggers are Hamas. That's right. That's correct. That is correct. Anyways, I would like to still do. I would still like to do some kind of a meetup at some point. There's other things that I could come down to. You know, it doesn't have to be that one thing. There's other things that I can come down to. So we'll try and figure that out. Okay. But anyway, that's what I was doing a lot this morning. That's why I'm late getting started. It's going to be it's honestly, like, let's be honest here. It's going to be a half-assed stream. It's going to be a half-assed stream today. I only have about 2 hours. But hey, this is my dedication to you, the people. This is my dedicated to making content that people enjoy. Leading you into a little room with your tweets from October 7th printed out in a dossier on the desk, just like Agent Smith in The Matrix. It appears you've been living 2 lives, Mr. Rousseau. One of these lives, you're a loving father, a boring 40-year-old man. The other life is lived in computers, where you're guilty of virtually every instance of Hamas support that we know of. One of these lives has a future, Mr. Rousseau. The other does not. Well, that sounds like a pretty good deal. But I got a better one for you. How about I give you the finger, and you give me my phone call? You can't scare me with this Gestapo crap. Fuck, The Matrix is so good. The thing is, now they actually... This is pre-9/11, The Matrix. Now they actually can scare you with the Gestapo crap. They absolutely can. They absolutely can scare you with the Gestapo crap now. If you get an immigration proceedings in the U.S., I got you pro bono, homie. I'll remember that up the Reds. I'll get your contact info for the next time I cross the border. Says here you're a 40-year-old Hamas blogger from Canada. Yeah. 1999, the peak of... Well, it wasn't... I don't know if you call it the peak of human existence. It was certainly the peak of Western civilization, though. That's it. It was Jenkos and Limp Bizkit. That was as good as it ever got, and it was all downhill from there. And I've been along for the ride the whole way. Man, The Matrix is just so good. God damn. Big ass plastic watches. So that's a little disappointing. I'm sorry to report that, but I just don't think that there's a way to figure it out. I made a crazy meal just now. I didn't know what to do. I had to do something really quick. I was on a phone call for 30 minutes and I had to figure something out. Here's what I did. Because I really like crisping up the mortadella for sandwiches, but I don't have any bread right now or any buns or anything like that. Spaghetti and mustard, that's right. We live in the backwash of 9/11 and always will. Yeah, and 9/11 was just the backwash of neoliberalism. You know. That was just the backwash of anti-communism. So here's what I did. Here's what I did just now for my lunch. So like I said, I like to crisp up that mortadella for sandwiches. I didn't have any bread. I crisped up some hot mortadella in the pan with some butter. Okay? I added a couple of eggs. And it was kind of like an omelet, but kind of not, because I didn't mix up the eggs, the full yolks. Mixed up a bunch of eggs on there. Just threw on some cheese. I kind of just tried to just flip it over. Just flipped over this big mass of stuff. Gave that a fry and then put it on a plate. I added some kimchi on top. So on my big thing of my big mass of egg and mortadella and cheese, added some kimchi on top and some mayo and sesame seeds. And honestly, it was fucking good. I don't know what you would call this meal. Is it a kimchi omelet? Is it an Asian style kimchi omelet? Maybe? I don't know. Yeah, it was just a big pile of slop. Sort of an omelet frittata, something like that. It was really good though. It was really fucking good. A stoner's frittata. That's a good way of looking at it. It was very nice. Now I'm ready to go. I got 2 hours. We're going to hang out and we're going to have fun. Red Wizard, I don't even know if I should repeat that. I feel like if I repeat the words that are written on the screen right now, that's asking to get clipped. That's just asking to get clipped out of context. Not that any of you fine individuals that ever dream of doing something like that. We know you would never even dream of clipping me out of context with some kind of crass sexual comment. We're here for the Jinkos and Limp Bizkit. It's true. I mean, we didn't realize it at the time. As someone that lived through that era, I was a teenager. I was 17, 18, 19 in that era. We did not realize that at the time, but it was all of Western civilization was about to it was the peak of the roller coaster, And now we're even though it's been 20 years, we're still just going on the downward slope. It's just starting to pick up steam. You never realize in those moments when you're in it. We all thought it was just going up forever. We all thought the line was just going to go up forever and everything was just going to keep getting better. The kids do be wearing wide leg jeans again. I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen that as well. That's one trend that I'm not going to participate in. I'm not going to participate in that. I'm not going to go back to the early to mid 2000s skinny jeans either. Because I really did that for a couple years. I'm not going to be wearing big baggy pants again, though. No way. It's not going to happen. I did it all for the nookie. What? The nookie. What? That song made no sense. Comfortable fit with a respectable tapers. Yeah, I think so. I think so. It's time to buy the dip, baby. Time to buy the dip. Invest in Jinko. Apes together strong. Hodl.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
I wear a tight pant.
Nice. Thank you, Anus Beard. Thanks for the 200 bits. Mine are fairly... They're not like... I don't like the bagginess. It's not skin tight, though. It's not skin tight. Yeah, buy the dip on Jinko. That's coming back. Okay? Let's all pool our money. We'll invest in Jinko. And we're going to be able to retire on a beach somewhere. When that explodes. Seems like kind of an interesting video in the Biden tariffs. The Perusk. Great leg has been growing on me. A Levi 511 is nice. What I like are the stretchy jeans. And like the stretchy jeans I have, again, they're not skin tight. They're not like leggings. But it's nice. It's very comfortable. It's very light and comfortable. The denim I find a little bit irritating, especially in the summer months. I live for jeggings. You were quoted on one of my favorite YouTube channels. Nice. I love the internet today, guys. Wonderful guys. Talk to Elliot before. Really embarrassing because I know the other guy. I've played Helldivers with. Ricky, I know that. Obviously, I know that. Obviously, I know the names of people that I've spoken to on podcasts before. Obviously, I know that. Thank you.
Rousseau phrased it on Twitter. Of offshoring. Tariffs, I guess that's the way. If anyone's cheating, it's you. What the fuck? Anyway, This really is the most predictable and inevitable chickens coming home to roost moment, as Rob Rousseau phrased it on Twitter. 1980, we will deindustrialize our society and export our manufacturing industry to China in exchange for cheap products and vast shareholder profits. 40 years later. Fuck. I mean, 2023 had the warmest temperatures the Earth has seen in over 2,000 years.
That's me. It's your boy. Who's this Rob guy? If only getting featured in these big YouTube videos. I'll get some more people in here. I was in one of Sean Vid's videos. I'm in this. Let's get me some more people in here now. Rob's feed should appear in all YouTube videos. Thank you, Decadune. I saw Emily Radikowski posted your tweet on her story, but she didn't credit me. Didn't credit me. She cropped me out. Emily, how are you gonna do me like that? I see them on Facebook all the time. Usually let me know. I always get a kick out of seeing that. I always get a kick out of seeing that. I just saw this was on Talk 30 to me on Instagram as well. I always get a kick out of seeing those. I don't believe I've been in a Philip DeFranco video. What I'm saying is, though... Huh? People got to be tuning into this. Maybe people don't tune in because I'm just sitting here with dead air, eating an apple. Perhaps that's the reason. Perhaps that's the reason I'm not regularly getting 4-digit viewers. Because this is what passes for content over here. Hey, that guy's on the that seems like an interesting guy in this YouTube video I just watched. I'm gonna go check him out on Twitch. They come over, I'm just slobbering all over an apple. Ugh. Must have the wrong guy here. I thought that person was like intelligent and articulate. He's just like me for real. Did you already do NBA talk? No, not really, Old Dutch, but I agree. Doncic and Kyrie were great last night.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Excuse me. DJ Chimp, thanks for the 17 months. Tier 1. Very cool. I really appreciate it. I'm still a little bit disappointed that the Nuggets lost that game. I know it's like I should cheer for like the more underdog team. I know it's really hard to like win a title in the first place, let alone defend the title and repeat the following year. Like it's really, really hard. I did really want to see Jokic versus Luka though. I think that would have been fun. That would have been fun to see the two Slavs going head to head for Slav supremacy, NBA Slavic supremacy. But Minnesota's a fun team. It's a fun team. Like Jokic was saying the other day after the interview, he was like, they seem pretty much designed to beat us. They have like really good guys. McDaniels is really good. Naz Reid is really good. Like it's a really good team. And I was very skeptical after they traded all those draft pieces to get Rudy Gobert. And boy, how's that actually worked out. Props to Gobert too. He was taking a ton of criticism for Jokic just annihilating him for a couple games, and they pulled it out. In fact, in that 7th game when Gobert hit that like end of shot clock turnaround fadeaway, and when that went in, it's just like, well, this game's over. Like that's when Gobert is hitting that shot, then it's like there's just not really much you can do. This one's finished. It'll be interesting that either the T-Wolves or the Mavs are going to be in the finals, though. I'm certainly going to be, if it is the Celtics playing them, I'm certainly going to be cheering for whoever's playing them. I really want actually the Pacers to beat the Celtics. I'd be very happy with that. Walked by a Naz Reid flag the other day, double take when I started to read Naz. People are getting the tattoos as well. They offered like free Naz Reid tattoos, like a tattoo parlor in Minnesota, and like hundreds of people are getting Naz Reid tattoos. A little dicey, you know? It's like something's obscuring it on your arm one day. You're going on a date or something, and it's like, who's this guy? What's this? Jason Kidd can get a ring as a coach. It's hard to believe. It's a possibility, though. It was looking like his coaching career was going to flame out. And now it's looking like a real possibility. Anyway, yeah, it was a good game last night. Don't really have a preference about Mavs and T-Wolves. I'm hoping for a fun series. I should get some water too. I don't know if I have the mental capacity or the energy to talk about serious shit today or what. Been doing a lot of chatting lately, haven't I? Just cheering on the NBA, that's right. I'm not the only one that thinks that if the troops got a team together, they could take on anyone in the NBA. One weird ChatGPT trend that I've been seeing as well is that people putting two phones together and getting ChatGPT to talk to itself. It's really strange actually to see, because the conversation will develop into all these different directions. I was watching this one where they're like saying hello to each other, and then like within 45 seconds or like, you know, maybe within a minute or so, they're talking about like quantum computing. They're having this conversation about all the things they're learning about quantum computing and stuff. Just bizarre. What a weird future world we're living in here. Very strange future world that we're inhabiting. I saw a real interesting computer file video talking about how ChatGPT can be jailbroken offline. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to think about when this technology is going to start appearing in all kinds of like, because you have like the Microsoft version now, you have the Meta version, you have Grok, you have Google is going, like all these companies are just going all in on that. I'm very interested for like, yeah, when different versions of it start popping up though. All these big tech ones seem like versions of the same thing. I want to see the Chinese AI. Did you upgrade your ChatGPT to get the flirty voice? I don't think so, because I think they had to change it because like Scarlett Johansson got pissed at them because they were like, "Hey, can you be the voice for ChatGPT?" And she was like, "No, thank you." And they were just like made her the voice anyways, and she's like, "What the fuck?" So I don't know. I had a little conversation with ChatGPT the other day, but it was not flirtatious in any way. It was strictly business, all business. They're really changing it so it's all like that episode of The Simpsons when he goes to see the car. There's like the model. Do you come with the car? Oh, you. That's what ChatGPT is going to be. Just give her some like Reddit humor. Oh, you. People are like, the future is here. I'm in love. I'm in love with this computer program. It gets me. It just gets me. Oh, you. That's all it does. Ooh, chat she PT. That's nice. That's good. JOI is inevitable. It's one of the only use cases for those LLMs. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with what that is. Not familiar with what that is, unfortunately. Google's been giving answers based on the Reddit data they bought. Yeah, I saw how completely cooked it is. Like, I saw someone did an example of like a pizza sauce. Or like this cheese doesn't stick to the pizza. And Google is like, you just simply mix in some non-toxic glue because of some like lame joke on Reddit from a decade ago from like Fucklord or something. Some name like that. And then that's appearing in people's Google results. That's good. That's very good. Jerk on instructions. It's audio instructions for applying jerk seasoning to your chicken. That seems like it could be valuable. I might have to look into this. To check this out from next time I'm cooking something. Look into this JOI business. Bill Nye the JOI. Oh boy. Who is Bill doing it in some kind of like scientific context, describing the scientific process? And what you're going to see in 3, 2, I love all of big tech's just feeding their existing services into a boiler in hopes it'll make AI happen before interest rates go up again and they'll go out of business. As I've said before, it's like the difference for me between like some of this AI stuff and like crypto NFTs is that this seems to be like an actual product, like an actual tangible technology that at least has the possibility to be somewhat useful, maybe, depending on how it's used and how it's deployed and who's running it. It honestly is amazing when you talk about that, James. Just like that, what was it, 12, 13 years of basically unlimited free money. And our state did nothing with it. We built nothing. All that decade plus of like basically free money flowing around. Didn't build no infrastructure, nothing. They built nothing. They literally just funneled it into the pockets of the most useless pieces of shit on the planet. That's what they did with all that free money. Just funneled it upwards. It's actually amazing, you know? Not even just over the last 10 years, but you think about what America could have looked like. With all we've talked about it before, but like with all the money that was spent on national defense, even since like the 50s, if that had been spent on like infrastructure and just like turning America into a basically like utopian society, could have been done. And they're like, no, let's just give it all to rich people instead. They can't think past the next quarter. That's right. They got that capitalist mentality. Like I've been saying, that's the difference between an economy that uses capitalism run by Marxists versus a capitalist economy run by capitalists. You see a big fucking difference in the values and the priorities. Eventually, some of that wealth is going to trickle down. Eventually, it's going to. Any day now, that wealth's going to trickle right the fuck down. That Rob is a North Korea defender. Crypto is a major contributor to them. Well, I support DPRK scamming anybody to get ahead. Whatever the scam, whatever scam they're running, I'm into it. I support it. Those DPRK hackers going ham. Exactly. Absolutely. So what do we got? What do we got? DPRK ran the love scam on Rob and it worked. You're goddamn right it worked. You're goddamn right it did. That was the voice, Jay. What do we got? He's got a great ass. And heat is so good. One day we'll have a great montage of one of the Kims showing Rob around a unified Korea with some dope music. I mean, I still do want to go. I mean, even just on a friendship delegation. Even if it's before the reunification that is one day coming. I still plan on bringing the friendship delegation. I only saw Dune 2. Oh, nice, Old Dutch. Did you like it? I really liked it. I don't know how or why, but they're making a sequel to Heat. Well, doesn't it mostly take place like when they're both younger, when both the guys are younger? Well, I don't know if the movie is going ahead, but I saw that there was a book. There's like a Heat 2, the book. After the box office results, we'll have to call it Cold. Oh boy, James. Really, it just depends on who's involved. It's half young Pacino, De Niro, and half Val Kilmer in the events after Heat. But Kilmer couldn't do it, though. Kilmer's too sick now to do it. The heatening. So how would you write it if it was like this? That just says to eat. That doesn't work. That doesn't work either. That doesn't really work either. I was trying to do one of those ones where you replace the number. None of it really worked, though. The heatening. This time it's personal. Heat 2, hotter. We can workshop this. I don't know. I'll go see Heat 2, whatever. So what do we have to look at here? Let me just see. Let's see what we got going here. And by the way, folks, if you want to support this program, if you enjoy tuning into TRRS to hang out with me and to have these conversations and these discussions and this analysis, please subscribe if you can. It's $5 a month. It's completely free of charge if you have an Amazon Prime account. And I'm trying to make that little number go up each and every day, the little number at the bottom of the screen. And I know I admitted today is going to be a little bit half-assed. I don't have as much time. But if you do want to support this program, folks, please subscribe or give subs or bits or tips or whatever it is. It's all very helpful. It's how I'm able to make a small living from doing this show. This show would not exist without the very generous contributions of the TRRS community. So if you can, please do subscribe and support the work that I do on here.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Crystal, for the gifted sub. Very cool. I appreciate that a lot. We do have a video here, breakthrough news, why Palestine liberation threatens the U.S. imperialist order with Bikram Gill. That might be good to take a look at. Right, that doesn't sound so bad. What do we think about that? Preheat was right there. That's nice. That's nice. Show Rob the money, as that classic saying goes. Let's do that. Let's watch that video. I think that would be a valuable way to spend this time together today, folks. Should be a good jumping off point for some discussion as well.
The conquest of Palestine, the colonization of Palestine, the subjugation of Palestine, this genocide, these are not things that are simply only about Palestine itself. Of course, we don't want to minimize the Palestinian national question and the question of Palestinian sovereignty, but the denial of sovereignty to Palestinians, and again, the conquest of Palestine is a part of a broader regional project that is core to the exercise of U.S. Global power. The maintenance of the axis of resistance, the maintenance of resistance forces in the region is really pivotal to actual real Palestinian sovereign reclamation going forward. But that's not just for Palestine, that's for the whole region, right? Like I think then for the people of Yemen to exercise real sovereignty, the people of Syria, people of Libya, in Iran and elsewhere to actually have a sovereign basis is a broader regional question as well.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rania Kalik, and this is Dispatches. The struggle for justice in Palestine isn't just a fight against the settler colonial Zionist project. It's a struggle against U.S. imperialism itself. To discuss this and more, I'm joined by Bikram Gill, a political scientist and author of the forthcoming book, The Political Ecology of Colonial Capitalism: Race, Nature, and Accumulation. But before we jump into it, this is just part of this episode. The full interview is available to Breakthrough News members only. You can become a member at patreon.com/Breakthrough News. And as always, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell so you get a notification whenever we post new content. And if you appreciate this show,
The rumor is Adam Driver would be young De Niro and Austin Butler would be young Pacino. That works. That works for me.
you can also donate below on YouTube. Bikram, welcome back to the show.
Great to be here.
I'm just going to get some water. Hang out with the chair for a sec.
Well, it's great to have you back. There is so much to talk about. In the past, every time I've had you on, we've discussed imperialism in various ways, and we're going to do that again. But we're going to talk about that in relation to Palestine. So let's start off with imperialism and the Palestine question. You know, now that Palestine and Gaza are dominating the world's attention, can you explain to our audience why is the fight for liberation of Palestine also or actually a fight against U.S. imperialism?
Yeah, so it is, I think there's some self-evident reasons why it is not just a fight against Zionist colonialism. It's not just a fight against Zionism. I mean, self-evidently, we can see that the United States has always been a major backer of the Zionist state, that it provisions, as it has over the past 6 months, it has provisioned large amounts of weapons. It provides political cover consistently. So there is a self-evident reality we can grasp where it would not be possible for Zionism and the Zionist project to continue without U.S. support. I think that's a very basic point that's worth reiterating. And you know what, this has been something that even Israeli Zionist media has constantly emphasized, is that if there wasn't these constant arms transfers, it'd be very difficult for the genocide to continue, for the Israeli colonial project to sustain itself. So I think at a very basic level, it is not enough to simply say the Palestinian struggle is in opposition to Zionism, when behind Zionism clearly stands U.S. imperialism in a material and a political register. So I think that's a very important point to begin with. So it is necessarily an anti-imperialist struggle. It is a fight against U.S. imperialism, because materially, without U.S. imperialism, this project could not go on. And there are specific material interests that the U.S. has in the subjugation of Palestine and the ongoing colonization of Palestine, which I know we're going to get into some of those a bit later on. But I think that's maybe a key point. And I just want to maybe elaborate on that a little bit here, is that I think very often there's a category error that people make where they think that a colonizer-colonized relationship can be isolated from a broader world system, right? So you can have a resistance against Zionism and maybe even appeal to U.S. imperialism as a way to facilitate Palestinian liberation struggle. And I know we're going to get into some of that later on as well, but I think that's a mistake that is made. That somebody like Ghassan Kanafani, even thinking about British imperialism, was placed a strong emphasis on, is that the conquest of Palestine is core to the entire imperialist world system. So you got to get out of this one-to-one understanding that the struggle is just a colonizer colonized, that in fact Palestine is central to the whole imperialist world system. And what we mean by imperialism beyond just a colonizer-colonized one-to-one system relationship is an imperialist system where you have a core and a primary imperial power, which is the United States, which through a monopoly on military and financial capital is able to impose relationships on the entirety of the periphery, not just Palestine. But Palestine is key to this. So yeah, I would just start off by saying that. Like, you can see very clearly there's a need for the defeat of U.S. imperialism, for Palestinian liberation, right? Because it is this that acts as the backstop for Israeli power.
No, it's all a really, really, really good point. And I just want you to elaborate a bit, because I'm gonna, kind of.
Israel is like the henchman mini boss. The USA is the final boss. It's so obviously good cop, bad cop. It's just like they just run the good cop, bad cop scam. Depends on who's involved. Like if it's Canada and the US, you've got Canada being the good cop and America being the bad cop. With Israel, it's kind of the inverse. That's all the shit about like Biden being frustrated with Netanyahu and all these things. Oh, Biden's so frustrated. I'm trying to rein this guy in. My partner here, he's had enough. I can't control him. He's going crazy. I'm sorry. I'm trying to stop him. If you just give us what we want, just give us something. Give us something and we can call it off. We're trying our best. I know he's out of control. I got him out of the room for a few minutes to cool down. If you just give us something to work with, we can get him to stop, okay? It's the classic scam that you've seen over and over, but on this like larger geopolitical context. It's organized crime as well, right? It's what cops also. It's organized. It's just a gigantic organized crime criminal cartel. Simple as it is. Israel is the top lieutenant, the attack dog.
Zoom in on a lot of those points that you made, and we can dissect them a bit more. But some people might say, like, why focus on this when obviously, like, we're talking about a genocide in Gaza and we should be focused on Israel, Palestine, and like, why make it about this broader struggle? So I'm curious if you could explain why it's so important to incorporate anti-imperialism into our analysis of Palestine.
Right, exactly. So I think that's where I will say that it is vital. I'll go back to the point I just made, right? So when we have the writings of Ghassan Kanafani, what is the emphasis there? Is that like there's a mistake that the Palestinian elite made, or not just the Palestinian elite, others might make from the inception or the beginnings of the Zionist project, that you can appeal to the imperial power, that you can appeal to British imperialism or U.S. imperialism, go around and try to get the U.S. to abandon, let's say, the Zionist state, and to support Palestinian liberation, right? So it becomes this question of, rather than focusing on how Palestinian resistance can challenge not just Zionist power, but imperialist power, by not understanding Palestine as an anti-imperialist struggle, the move can be, okay, you fight Zionist colonialism, but you seek to appeal to U.S. imperialism for protection. You seek to appeal to U.S. imperialism to enforce laws and rules and et cetera that it's never going to do, right? So I think it's really pivotal to understand that it is, in fact, U.S. imperialism that is the primary contradiction in Palestine, right? That the subjugation of Palestine is core to the maintenance and reproduction of U.S. imperial control over key resources, over U.S. financial power that it exercises not only over the global south, but over its own quote unquote allies in Europe and elsewhere, right? So I think the question of anti-imperialism is fundamental, right? It's only through the defeat of U.S. imperialism in the region that Palestinian liberation can really take hold, right? Because it is through that defeat that the conditions for actual sovereignty for not just Palestinians, but all peoples across the region.
And by the way, like, just to add on to what Bikram Gill is saying here, exactly why, in terms of like my own beliefs, that's why I support critically in most cases, not blindly, not without qualification. That's why I support challenges to U.S. hegemony. You know, even if sometimes I might not agree with everything about these places. Iran. Russia. China, I do agree with a lot, but it's part of it, right? Because like it's not just Palestine, but the primary contradiction that needs to be overthrown. It needs to be defeated in order for like anything good to happen. You know, this imperialist monster has to be slain. That's why I don't understand this like, oh, this you're just a campist. You're such a campist because you support this other. You just view everything as being in these camps, but it's like, how much simpler does it have to be? You have the West and you have everybody else. And right now, as long as the West is in power, nothing good is ever going to happen. We can never really move forward as a human civilization as long as the West is still there and still wielding the same level of power and still using the same level of like violence and manipulation. No? That's why I don't get people that are like, no, of course I don't support America. Of course I don't support American imperialism, but also any legitimate challenge to American imperialism, I also don't support either. I take this third stance that's the really brave and brilliant genius take, where I stand against imperialism when it's America and also Iranian. Checkmate, tankies. It's just a useless opinion. I'm sorry if I talk about this a lot. You know? It's just useless, though. Really, it really is.
Will become possible. So I'll just say, rather than appeal to U.S. imperialism to protect Palestinians against Zionism, and sometimes that appeal is, hey, we agree with you, U.S. imperialism on every other issue. Just come and recognize Palestinian rights. The correct move is to actually contest and seek to weaken U.S. imperial power and defeat it. So that removes the source of support and backstop that enables Zionism to continue to do this, right? So it is fundamentally an anti-imperialist struggle that is actually key to the broader world systemic challenge to U.S. imperialism today.
And when we talk about, you know, Palestine as a U.S. or colonizing Palestine as really a U.S. imperialist project, why? You know, what does the U.S. get out of it? Why is the U.S. backing a genocide in Gaza? Because obviously they wouldn't do it unless they're benefiting in some way.
Right. So the U.S. is definitely benefiting, but I would say it's there's something even much more at stake for the U.S. than simply benefiting. I think right now the U.S. imperial power has been challenged in a way in our contemporary conjunction in a way it never has before. Right. It's come to crisis. Not simply we can think about what's happened in the context of the war in Ukraine over the past few years with the rise of China. So you have this clear weakening of the basis of U.S. imperialism. I think so. The
Iranian
the need to uphold
backward and bad. This Tibetan might be something to that, or this like Uyghur fundamentalism. Let's explore those. Let's explore those. Yes to those. No elsewhere. Yes. I just don't. I don't get it. People that are really like, yeah, I'm so opposed to the American hegemony. I'm so opposed to American imperialism. And they see for the first time in a generation an actual rival to that being created. They see this new world emerging, with institutions like BRICS and all these different countries, like all these different kind of cultures and even different political systems coming together to start to like bring back more sovereignty, more multilateralism, challenging Western hegemony. And people see this happening. They're like, no, this is also bad. No, not like that though. No. This is just what I just fundamentally just don't get it. And I feel sad in a way for some of these folks because it's like they're missing something beautiful. I think they're really missing out. They're really missing out on something that is very cool that's happening. Not to say that it's some instant salve or that it's going to like fix all the world's problems right away or that imperialism is going to be destroyed overnight. Like anyone thinks that. But you see this process and this ongoing shift and this change that's happening. This challenge to Western hegemony for the first time in our lifetime. And yeah, that's what they say, Jay. Not only is this just as bad, it's actually worse. We got to stick with the devil we know. That's why that Kwame Ture quote has stuck with me. If I'm the Imam of Mecca, American imperialism's fighting the devil, on the side of the devil. How easy to understand. And this is another thing that I've talked about often, right? All these guys that we like, all our guys, whether it's Kwame Ture, whether it's Che, whether it's Marx and Lenin themselves, they left us or Mao, they left us very clear instructions. No, just don't trust the imperialists. Don't ever trust them. No, or yeah, American imperialism is fighting the devil. I'm on the side of the devil. It's really easy to understand. That's the beauty of it. And people still fail this basic test. They still fail this basic test. It's very unfortunate.
Maintain the Zionist proxy is kind of a really existential crisis for U.S. imperialism, right? And I think, for an example, the agreement that China helps broker between Iran and Saudi Arabia last year, right? It clearly opens a very different regional configuration that could really fundamentally and permanently undermine the U.S. regional order, through which the U.S. has maintained a certain relationship between the oil and the U.S. dollar that has been key to how the U.S. has enforced dependency of other states upon it for its exercise of imperialist power, right? So the U.S. Cannot allow for Israel to fall. It cannot allow for Zionism to weaken, because it is key to the projection of U.S. power in West Asia, which is key to the projection of U.S. power globally, right? So this is and I know we're going to get into later on, but that dollar-oil relationship has been very key to how it has subjugated Germany and Japan underneath it, to how it has subjugated the global South more generally. And so the question of the interest the U.S. has in the genocide is that if the Palestinians are not disarmed, if they're not deterred, right, which will bring about an existential crisis in the Israeli state, then this will remove a key, let's say, proxy bulwark of U.S. imperial power in the region. Now, there are, of course, direct benefits that the U.S. gets in terms of we can think about the military-industrial complex. We can think about weapons companies and the profits they make. But I think more fundamentally, this is a strategic question that the United States is confronting because it is part of the U.S.'s refusal to entertain the possibility of an emergent multipolar world, right? The desire to maintain imperialist domination over the entire world necessitates the maintenance of U.S. absolute domination over West Asia, which necessitates the Zionist proxy to maintain those relations.
Well, I mean, that's a really, really excellent way to frame it. And I think that something you were alluding to earlier, I want to touch on that. And here's how I'll put it, is I think there's this stream of liberalism, that in recent years had become increasingly vocal on the issue of Palestine because of what Israel does is just so horrific, right? It's just this like segregationist, like far-right fascistic settler colony. But when I talk about this particular stream of liberalism, they speak of Palestine in, pro-Palestine terms, but they do it while remaining very silent, or in some cases even supportive of imperialist policies in the rest of the region. And here, I mean, the kinds of people who will be, for example, pro-Palestine, but then also they supported the regime change war on Syria, or they supported the NATO intervention in Libya, or you could even go out of the U.S. These are the kinds of people who might, support.
I support Palestine, but not Iran, though. Even though Iran's the only country meaningfully helping Palestinians fight right now. No. I can't be seen doing that, though. That doesn't really play well online. It doesn't play well with the people that I'm connected to. I support Palestine just as a kind of abstract concept. I think that's one thing that's been kind of like has been brought into sharper relief over the last 8 months, right? The people that support Palestinians as this kind of abstract concept, but when it comes to actually materially supporting that, like whether it's like Iran or Yemen or whatever, then I'm a little more squishy on that. That makes me a little uncomfortable. Or when they pick up a bomb and or a paraglider and go break out of the concentration camp that they're in. Whoa, can't ever support that. Oh, no. can't support their actual armed wing that's like engaging in armed struggle. We couldn't do that. We couldn't do that. We can just support Palestine as just kind of an abstract concept, and then as soon as it gets into the nitty-gritty detail, not this support materially kind of evaporates. I support the people who need to be rescued from the burning house, but not the firefighters who came, because I hear they're very sexist. I mean, it was funny watching that Piers Morgan about Iran, where he's just like, most 80% of the country despises the regime and wish it would go away. Well, like, what we should, if that's your like metric for like whether a government is like evil and authoritarian and needs to be overthrown, let's take a look at the good old British Parliament right now. Let's go look at the approval numbers for the Senate, for the United States Senate, and the United States government in general. Let's look at the approval numbers there and see the relative happiness that people have with their government. Oh, so should America just be instantly overthrown then, I guess? Is that an authoritarian? Well, it is, yes. It's just funny using that as a metric to determine whether a place is like authoritarian or not. Oh, people don't like the regime, and often as we talk about with a lot of these places, that's exactly what sanctions are for, is to make life difficult for as many people as possible. So they take that frustration out on the ruling parties. They try that in Cuba, they tried in DPRK, they tried in Iran. That's what these blockades and these sanctions are about. And then they use that as an example of how immoral and illegal these regimes are, and how undemocratic and illegitimate they are. Yeah, what's Brandon's approval rating? Let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at what people are saying about Joe Brandon.
NATO's encroachment around Russia and the ongoing, funding of this endless war in Ukraine to bleed the Russians. You'll have a person who thinks all of those things from a very liberal imperialist perspective. But then on Palestine, they're like, oh, no, that's occupation. It's horrible, which is great. I'm glad they understand occupation is bad. However, this can be very problematic. So why is it crucial to sort of prevent that stream of liberalism from dominating? Because I think what the part that I think is really dangerous here is that they tend to be quite successful as isolating Palestine from the rest of the region. So I guess here I'm asking you to explain how and why you can't have a genuinely liberated Palestine without getting rid of U.S. imperialism in the rest of the region. Like, it's not like you can just be good on Palestine and not on anything else, because the two go together.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think the examples that you raise, particularly around the proxy war in Syria and in Libya and even Ukraine, I think those are very important examples that are part of an interconnected project to maintain U.S. imperialism, right? So I think, again, the first point to emphasize once again is that the conquest of Palestine, the colonization of Palestine, the subjugation of Palestine, this genocide, these are not things that are simply only about Palestine itself. Of course, we don't want to minimize the Palestinian national question and the question of Palestinian sovereignty, but the denial of sovereignty to Palestinians, and again,
when Joe Biden and people say like, oh, we want a Palestinian state, we do. We want to make this happen. Which is funny because Israel doesn't want that, so it's not going to happen even in the version that they want. And that's it. Like, as long as imperialism is still decisive kind of like power in the region, all the two-state solution that people like Joe Biden really want is just basically a rebranded version of the exact same situation that's happening right now. It's just this kind of bullshit, non-militarized, powerless state that's just completely at the mercy of Israel. This idea that like with the US still you can have some kind of sovereignty or some kind of like security kind of two-state solution is just not, it's just delusional.
The conquest of Palestine is a part of a broader regional project that is core to the exercise of U.S. Global power, right? And before that, British global power. So what do we mean by that? Is that we know from British imperialism's embrace of Zionism and its working with Zionism, a key objective there is to establish, at a very basic level, imperialist control over the hydrocarbon wealth of the region. Now, of course, you can do this through local proxies, the Saudis and other client states, right? But there is a way in which Zionism is understood to be a direct Western implantation in the region, right? That can allow for a more acute and sharper form of political and military control and projection of power in the region. Now, that control over oil and the link up it's had with the dollar has been key, like I mentioned, to US imperial power and its projection across the world. So that's one point worth emphasizing, right? That the conquest of Palestine is a part of a broader regional dynamic to deny sovereignty to the peoples of the region in order to control the flow of resources into and out of the region in a way that benefits US capitalist imperialism. So that's one thing. Now, the second point, though, is in isolating Palestine from the broader regional dynamics, the point is to weaken Palestinian resistance. And it behooves the left and those in solidarity with Palestine to understand this, right? If you're in solidarity with Palestine, but you're not attendant to the dynamics that are either strengthening or weakening actually material Palestinian resistance, then what you risk doing is transforming your engagement with Palestine into one in which at most what you can do is beg for the West or the imperialists to recognize Palestine and to save Palestine and to afford Palestine some autonomy, right? But what are the concrete conditions for Palestinian liberation, right? The concrete conditions are to challenge the terms through which Palestinians have been denied sovereignty and people across the rest of the region, right? Now, how has this occurred as well? It's been through the overwhelming military power that Zionism has exercised in the region vis-a-vis with the support first of British imperialism and then US imperialism, right? So now to understand the example of Syria that you emphasize here, we know that in the 1980s, of course, that the invasion of Beirut leads to the disarming of the Palestinians, right? It leads to an Oslo Road, which is a part of the apex of US imperial power at the end of the century. The end of history, there's no alternative, get in line, just play by the rules that the United States has set. And the Western world more generally has set. So global South states, they have to beg for loans and credit and accept structural adjustment conditions. And in the Oslo framework, the Palestinians have to lay down their arms and basically depend upon some idea of US beneficence or goodwill to ensure that they will eventually get a state, that their land will not be stolen, and et cetera. But we know that doesn't happen through Oslo. Land theft accelerates, and there is no road to Palestinian sovereignty because there's no material basis to it because the Palestinians have been disarmed in the lead up to Oslo. But what else is happening in the region? Of course, we know that the Iranian Revolution, the rise of Hezbollah in Lebanon, the eventual emergence of an axis, a corridor between Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah that establishes an actual material force, a material basis with which to challenge Zionist and U.S. imperial power in the region. Right, so there's a material basis being
Palestine,
built
but not Hezbollah,
through which now there can be a shift from dependency, from a certain kind of begging proxies and hopefulness that imperialism will grant you rights, to actually raising up a military power, a force capacity that can become the real basis for sovereignty. Right? What is sovereignty? Right, exercising sovereign power over your resources, your lands, your labor, in a way that is not dependent on an imperial power. Well, then you need to have a force to be able to stand up to the imperialists and the colonizer. So this is being raised up through this emerging alliance in the 80s and 90s and 2000s. And we know, of course,
ultimately it's liberalism, isn't it? It's like, I support Palestinians as long as they non-violently protest and vote. And anything beyond that, I can't possibly support. It's not student encampments, certainly not armed struggle like Hamas, certainly not groups like armed groups like Hezbollah, right? I only support this vague notion of Palestinian sovereignty, which means nonviolent resistance, working within institutions to eventually get America to agree to somehow carve them out a state. You know, the rule of law has got to be respected. That's it. It's like, it's ultimately just a form of liberalism. Any form of like legitimate movement that it tries to enact any kind of liberation And I think that's the frustrating thing as well. And I think I understand why, because like people have been doing that. Palestinians have been doing that. That was one of the things that really touched me. That one stream that we watched with Ali Abunimah shortly after this started, like still in like late October, when he's just like, we went to the speeches, we went to the meetings, we lobbied people, we did do things the right way, we did do things non-violently, and nothing worked. Nothing ever worked. No? They've been trying this. They've been doing this for generations. And then when things finally boil over and explode into violence, you have these very same people being like, "Oh, of course I support Palestinians," but now it's like way too far. And they like repeat lies and they repeat narratives that justify mass murder against them. And the cycle repeats again. Make the cops violent, you lose the respectability politics game. And that's right. And that's for a lot of these people, especially people that don't have actual skin in the game. I want to support any progressive cause, but like Palestine is this primary factor of this. I want to support it as this arbitrary concept because it gives me a certain like sense of self-satisfaction or catharsis. And it makes me project that I'm a good person that cares about good things. Not that I actually support. Actually, Andor really gets into this very idea in very interesting ways with Mon Mothma and that whole storyline. The Great March of Return showed exactly how much you achieve with peaceful protest against colonizers. I mean, and B-Rat, it was crazy. Like after October 7th happened, I was like, did people forget about this? Like, oh, they're being violent now. Oh boy, I can't support that. It's like, did we already forget about this? This was not that long ago. It was 2018, 2019. Did we really already forget that they've tried all of these strategies? Oh, MLK wouldn't approve. Gandhi wouldn't approve. It can only be nonviolent resistance. It can only ever be nonviolent resistance. The same people not only don't support Great March of Return or obfuscated that or both sides that or didn't put two and two together. They don't support BDS either. The same people. The same people. I support Palestinians, but only this kind of like generic nonviolent protest. Well, what about BDS? Also not that though. But also not that. That's still too much. Just boycotting and divesting and trying to sanction Israel. No, that's too much. Still too much. Like it's crazy. It's literally just an abstract concept. I support Palestinians and any actual material means of like this movement achieving some kind of sense of sovereignty or liberation. The same people that are like, no, I support Palestinians. Of course I do. Of course I support Palestinians. And the same people say, no, I don't think so. Like it's amazing. No boycott. Don't march up to the prison camp fence. I remember a lot of dialogue during the course of the Great March of Return as well, talking about the border fence. So what do you expect them to do? They're charging the border fence. They're charging the border fence, and you expect them to just sit by and do nothing. What border? There's no border. They don't have a state. They do not have a state. There's no border. There's a prison camp fence. That's what people have been saying. It's a prison camp, Gaza. All this shit. Oh, we were attacked by our neighbor. On October 7th, we were attacked by our neighbor. That's the whole thing. That's the whole fundamental contradiction about this two-state solution. And Israel being the only democracy in the Middle East. It's not a democracy. If Palestinians do not have a state, then they're just excluded from participating in that kind of democracy. Oh, it's just frustrating. And like I'm sure, and in fact, I'm positive you can go back through the years and look at the newspaper clippings and the op-eds and all the discourse that was going on, about any of these big struggles, whether it's the ANC in South Africa, Vietnam, Korea, all these proxy wars in Central and South America in the 80s, all the same shit. Of course, I'm against the war. I'm against imperialism. I don't support anyone materially doing anything to change. Get the same thing domestically as well, right? Of course, I support more people getting health care. Of course, I support all these big progressive causes. What, you mean you're actually organizing to make these things happen and pressure a ruling class? What? That's so upsetting. That's so upsetting. Don't you know they tell us what's going on? They tell us what the agenda is, and we shut up and we just vote for them, and we go home, and then 2 years later we show up again and we do what they tell us. Of course I support these things. It's just now is not the right time. Now is not the right time. It's not the way to do it. All of these people, right? They support all these things in the abstract. Whatever social movement, whatever anti-war movement, whatever anti-colonial struggle, they support it in the abstract. In practice, though, it's never good enough. It's always not this way, not right now. Frustrating, isn't it? That's why there's a whole generation that's moving past this now, and that's why these people are losing it. People are fucking losing it because they realize there's a whole generation that doesn't have this like obsession with like bullshit nuance and like this totally abstract support for like social or political causes. People are tired of this, especially young people. That's why liberals are fucking losing it. Because they don't get to keep their precious moral high ground. That's where they live, right? They live in the moral high ground, where they get the moral high ground because they have these great values, but weirdly enough, interestingly enough, they don't actually have to sacrifice anything. And things can just stay exactly as they are, but they occupy this moral high ground where they support good things that are just not possible because the bad guys are preventing. They want to feel good about themselves. They want to feel like they're good people that have good progressive values. They care about the environment. They care about immigration. They care about whatever it is. Palestine. As soon as anything happens that materially might deliver results for some of these causes that they claim to be in, lo and behold, they don't believe in it anymore. Not like this. These procedural arguments. It's just tiresome. It's just absolutely tiresome. And I think people are moving away from it. People are getting just completely fed up with it.
But Hezbollah is very successful in doing so. And in 2006, when they defeat Israel, actually to take a step back, the successes of Hezbollah in the 1980s and 90s is what inspires the Palestinian Second Intifada, which again then introduces this equation of force through which settlers are expelled from Gaza. So we're seeing a different road emerging, a real road to real Palestinian sovereignty, which is a part of a road to broader regional sovereignty for peoples across the region more generally, right? Now, how do the imperialists respond is you have Tony Blair speak of a Shia crescent in 2006. You have the King of Jordan using the same language, right? And actually Jordan and Egypt are very good examples here of how you have these two states that maybe at one point represented strategic depth for Palestinian resistance, at one point represented a depth of supporting armed struggle, of armed resistance in the 60s and 70s earlier, then become a support for Zionism and imperialism, right? So this is what's being attempted to be imposed upon Syria after 2006. Syria becomes clearly a target to disrupt this a weapons corridor, to disrupt the material basis of a rising challenge to imperialism and Zionism that is both inspiring and supporting Palestinian resistance, right? So insofar as there is an attempt to delink these struggles,
have we considered that
right, to delink Palestinian liberation struggle from the U.S. attempt to repress this axis by conducting a proxy war in Syria, right? This is a very it has certain very risky implications, right? Because what it will do is will again and again return Palestinians to a dependent state, right? You remove, if you smash the Syrian state, you smash the Libyan state, if you destroy Yemen, if you destroy all of these regional forces that are actually constructing a power, a real concrete power to challenge imperialism, then you will leave Palestine again isolated and dependent and only hoping for the goodwill of Western civil society, right? So I think
Turned to
that
dust
is
with
really
the guy at the end of Indiana Jones 3. Checkmate. Checkmate, Lib.
I think one thing that I would emphasize very strongly is that the maintenance of the axis of resistance, the maintenance of resistance forces in the region is really pivotal to actual real Palestinian sovereign reclamation going forward. But that's not just for Palestine, that's for the whole region, right? Like I think then for the people of Yemen to exercise real sovereignty, the people of Syria, people of Libya, in Iran and elsewhere to actually have a sovereign basis is a broader regional question as well.
And you touched on U.S. I guess the resources in the region, and that's obviously like the resource of oil is very important. I'm curious if you could maybe explain the U.S. dollar oil relationship and how that projects U.S. power through the region and really beyond through its control over the region.
Yeah, I think so. That's key. That's something that I think it's useful to spend some time on. So, when we think about something that I've kind of been circling back to here is when we think about what is imperialism. Okay, so colonialism can be a direct one-to-one. The colonizer colonizes a colonized population. You have a one-to-one relationship. Now, imperialism is a broader structure, right, through which an imperial power imposes relations of dependency. So even if you're formally free, you depend upon the imperial core for access to key resources, without which you cannot engage in projects of economic development that are required to maybe stabilize your society and your state to some extent, right? And now that enables a constant value flow, a surplus value flow from the periphery to the core. Now, imperialism does this. It does this not by exercising always direct territorial control, right? It's not like that the imperialism necessitates always that they usurp the sovereignty of Saudi Arabia, or that there's a usurpation of the sovereignty of certain states. What is key for imperialism is controlling the flow of capital across borders. Who has sovereign power over the flow of capital and key commodities into and out of key regions and across borders, right? Now that is very key. So now obviously the key commodity in our world system for the past century has been oil, right? Now that's very clear. But there's a specific way in which the United States tied up the oil with the dollar in the 1970s, right? Now, this was done in order to maintain U.S. power over both its quote-unquote allies and the global South at a moment of declining U.S. economic competitiveness, right? So after World War II, there's a collective imperialism that Samir Amin argues emerges, right, between the U.S., EU, and Japan. By the 1970s, though, there's contradictions that are emerging here, where Germany and Japan are starting to outcompete the United States, right? And the U.S. has been in a state of declining economic competitiveness for half a century. We clearly see that in relation to China today, right? So now, at the same time, global South states are rising in an era of decolonization, trying to undertake import substitution industrialization, trying to establish the basis of sovereign industrialization. So there's a material basis through which you can contest neocolonialism, overcome dependency. So what the United States does in the 1970s, after the 1973 war, it establishes an agreement with Saudi Arabia, through which, actually just to take a step back, now why does it do so is because France and other of its allies actually start calling in the US dollar. This is very well known, right? In the 1960s, de Gaulle and others say, we don't think the dollar is actually a safe, worthwhile reserve currency. We would like to call it in for gold, right? And we know Nixon then delinks the dollar from gold. And at that moment, very shortly thereafter, the United States then makes an agreement with Saudi Arabia to essentially relink the dollar with oil, right? So there's a 1974 agreement with Saudi Arabia through which oil will be sold in dollars, and the US will provide a military security umbrella to protect Saudi Arabia. So what does that do? By forcing or linking up all sale of oil with US dollars, that means even if Germany is outcompeting the United States, even if Japan is outcompeting the United States or any global South state, they need oil for any form of production. Right now, to have oil, then you have to hold US dollars. Right. So what this does is it provisions the United States with a depth of financial power.
That's what
right?
de-dollarization
they're able
is
to
doing,
go skim
right?
off the top of all economic activities without being a productive player in any of them. What the Chinese have recently been calling U.S. seigniorage power, through which they profit by having the global reserve currency. But then it also, what it leads to capital constantly parking itself in U.S. banks. And then U.S. banks then are able to control the provisioning of capital and loans to the global South. And it produces and increases this dependency, which really consolidates by the 1990s era of globalization, right? So the oil-dollar relationship restores U.S. financial supremacy, even though there isn't a hard economic basis. The U.S. is not the most economically competitive nation, but because it links the oil with dollar, it's able to restore a certain financial supremacy, which renews the dependency of the South on the United States, but it also subjugates its allies underneath it once again, which is, of course, as we've discussed, I think, when I've been on the program before, one of the key objectives of the war in Ukraine, right, is to continually subjugate its European allies underneath it, so Europe doesn't look to establish relations with Russia and China that might lead to a multipolar world rather than a world dominated by U.S. imperialism. So I think that's the key element of the dollar-oil relationship. It's been fundamental to U.S. hegemony and imperialism. And it's been projected and maintained through, obviously, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Israel in the region, right? So these are the proxy forces through which the United States projects power. And I think, again, to return to the previous question, one reason why the U.S. is making such a stand right now in so aggressively backing this genocide is because the Iran-Saudi detente that happened last year, the ending of the Yemen war, right? And China is constantly working with others, Russia, Iran, or whoever, to think about an alternative currency system that can weaken the U.S. ability to dominate the world economy through the dollar, right? So the Iran-Saudi relationship opens up a different horizon for the region, right? And I think that's one reason why you're seeing the U.S. trying to push a normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel and trying to really shore up Israel at this moment in which it is being challenged in a way it hasn't before.
It's Jover, though. It's Jover.
Oh, wow.
That's the fascinating thing about this moment, right? They overplayed their hand. This normalization that they wanted, it's not going to happen. That's finished now. October 7th made sure of that. I'm sorry, but it's Jover. This de-dollarization process is continuing. I read an interesting thing as well about how, there's plans put in place to, if things escalate with China, to cut China off from oil. But China has created this entire Belt and Road Initiative that gives them access to oil without using the sea. They have access to meet all their energy needs, and the U.S. does not have the ability to sanction them. It seems like that's been a big part of this emerging multipolarity or multilateralism or whatever, right? Creating this world where the United States doesn't have the ability to economically coerce different countries through sanctions or blockades or whatever. And Russia was kind of the canary in the coal mine for this process. Oh, don't worry, Zelensky, keep pushing up to these red lines. No peace deal. Keep pushing up to these red lines. Keep shelling the Donbass. Russia's going to invade. We're going to have your back. We're going to sanction the shit out of Russia. Their economy is going to collapse. Putin's going to get overthrown. We're going to be able to move in and break it apart. Don't you worry. We got this under control. And then Russia invades, and it's 2 years later, and America's sorry about that. That didn't actually work out. And none of this sanctions regime just failed. It fell completely flat. That's a crazy development in this new world that we're living in. The U.S. just does not have the ability to use sanctions to the same extent to manipulate and destabilize other countries. And Syria was coming up as well. Syria was the first example where it's just you actually had a challenge to this militaristic hegemony as well, where it's like, no, we're not just going to let you overthrow countries with these proxy wars. Libya was the last time. We're not letting you do it in Syria. And they didn't. Who could have known the U.S. would abandon Ukraine? If only there were dumbass Canadian people screaming on here for weeks and months about this, who were called like red fash tankies or whatever the fuck it is. Yeah, no one could have predicted. No one could have possibly predicted that. That's the whole thing with Ukraine and all the conversations we've had about that. I will absolutely cop to the fact that I was wrong about whether Russia would invade. I loudly and confidently predicted that they would not, famously, as many people have reminded me over the years. I will own up to that. I was wrong. Because when these like intelligence guys or Western military guys start saying Russia's going to invade, these people are liars. So yes, I generally, when these people start saying one thing, I assume the opposite is true. And that was one case where almost in spite of themselves, they were actually correct. But I do think all of our skepticism about Ukraine, continuing to pump weapons into Ukraine, continue to sending endless shipments of arms and cash to Ukraine, has been a fucking disaster. And that's something that we did say. I might have been wrong about whether this invasion would happen or not, but I think we've been completely proven correct about our skepticism about continuing to support that proxy war this whole time. No? Ask her all the scum you've been. Oh, you're upset. that went really hard.
It is being challenged in a way it hasn't before.
Oh, wow. I mean, when you say it all like that, it becomes so clear who the actual enemy is. And it's a big one. And it's important to express that when we talk about the colonization of Palestine. And then I want to go back to again, because I feel like this point has been made, but can you kind of like speak to the centrality of the colonization of Palestine to everything you just said? Because I want to just emphasize that as much as possible, because a lot of people don't recognize necessarily the connection between controlling this area when it comes to the U.S. domination of the entire region and everything you just talked about.
Right. So, I mean, I think we know that what is the famous quote that, Joe Biden actually said in the 1980s, right? If there wasn't an Israel,
yeah,
you have to create one.
We would have to create one, right? So, and I may be mistaken, but I don't think it is maybe Biden who said that, but there's been, characterizations of Israel as this giant aircraft carrier for the United States, right? This massive store of basically U.S. weapons and ability to project military power throughout the region, right? So now we know, for example,
but with a degree of separation,
in the proxy war in Syria, that the Zionist state played a key role in backing those forces that were working with the U.S. to smash the Syrian state and to basically undermine the axis of resistance in that way, right? So there's a concrete way through which I think Israel does act as a proxy force in the region, and that there's a way in which through the U.S., Saudi, Israel, I think Turkey relationship, there's a way in which it kind of enables and allows for this projection of military power via Israel, and it enables, I think, the Saudi-U.S. relationship to be stabilized as well, which is why I think they're pushing for normalization. So I think at the basic point, though, imagine if you don't have an Israel in the region. Like, just imagine, like, as a thinking exercise, imagine you remove Israel from the region with a liberated Palestine, right? Like, a historic Palestine becomes liberated, and you don't have that. Can we imagine the United States maintaining an imperialist power in the same way when we're already seeing, for example, Saudi Arabia talking to Iran via China?
It's funny you say that too, Sean. Canada would have been smart to start building bridges with Russia 25 years ago. Then it's almost pointless to even play this game, since we could have just made better moves every damn day. I mean, the funny thing too is that we did start building bridges with China. It was something we talked about like early on in this show, like when we started doing this. like that Bethune movie. That was a whole like project with China and Canada to celebrate this Canadian and like kind of start talking about his legacy. There were all these efforts being made to create these like cultural bonds and these cultural ties. And then America said, okay, it's enough. It's time to stop. And we said, okay, yes, sir. And we just stopped. Because we're obviously a free and democratic and sovereign society as well.
Now, this is not to say the Saudis are some revolutionary force. They're very opportunistic, but there is a way in which you can see if you remove Zionism as a proxy in the region, it would change the equation for the local client states that the U.S. Upholds otherwise. So I think very much there has to be an emphasis that the liberation of Palestine is key. It's actually at the center of the struggle against U.S. imperialism, which has incredible, obviously, bearings for the entire global South, for much of those states that are on the periphery, right? If the liberation of Palestine weakens or eliminates...
That's the thing, Sean, but like you're saying, it's not good when Bibi is showing how easy it is to spit in their face, because it's kayfabe, though. Because like ultimately Israel is still upholding U.S. hegemony, even if they're like ostensibly, oh, they're not doing what we're telling them. No, they're not listening to us. They're spitting in our face. If they were actually threatening the U.S. hegemony in any way...
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I just think it's all kayfabe. Diego, thank you for a gifted... Diego. And if anyone else does want to support this show, remember, trying to make the little number go up every single day. If you can support TRRS, please do subscribe. If you can, support the show, support the community, get the tiny little images. I would appreciate it a lot. Also, support Breakthrough News, because they're really excellent.
That are on the periphery, right? If the liberation of Palestine weakens or eliminates the U.S. hold over the region, this will open up developmental space for the entire, I think, global South. So I think anti-imperialists really need to key in on the centrality of the Palestinian struggle.
If Canada spurned American orders, we'd be invaded and fold faster than a pre-folded paper. The idea that we're actual allies. Well, yeah, we're allies. Like I use this analogy.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
38. I call it the dirty 8 because I have accidentally pooped my pants. Chat, someone please help me.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Marty, for 8 months, 38 months. Resub at tier 2, and for everything you do for me in the community. I appreciate it. And thanks, Comrade Bushy, as well. Thank you, Comrade Bushy. I had something and I was rudely interrupted. Yeah, okay, sorry. I used this, and it's okay. I appreciate you, Marty. I used this analogy when I talked to Sina on the East as a podcast a couple weeks ago. But like, yeah, Canada and the US, we're allies in the sense that like in the Back to the Future movies, Biff Tannen and like Flea were allies. We're Flea and the United States is Biff. Oh, sure, we're just hanging out. We're just equally important strategic partners. Not how it works.
And I want to just I've actually talked to Ali Qadri on the show about this, who I know is someone whose work that you've read in full, and he speaks to this very well. And I want to ask you about it when it comes to U.S. imperialism in the region. I mean, we've talked about the dollar hegemony, the oil, the resources, but what else does the U.S. get out of the Middle East? Because when we think about Africa or Latin America, there's a bit more diversity of resources, I would say, than you have in a place like the Middle East or West Asia. Same thing, but some people don't know that when we say West Asia, we mean Middle East. But I mean, the kind of, when we think about like Africa and Latin America, there's other things. There's like copper and coffee and, cobalt and just so much. Whereas in the Middle East, it's just oil. But I think it's even beyond oil, isn't it? I mean, yes, the Middle East produces oil, but also it almost seems as though when it comes to the Middle East specifically, war has become a resource in and of itself. In a way where
That's a
like
really good
all
point.
of these US weapons and, global North companies that sell weapons
excuse to
make a
give
killing off
money
of
to the
selling weapons to
military
be
contractors.
used to destroy the Middle East. And so I'm just curious if you can speak to that aspect of imperialism in the region.
Yeah, so that's very important. And what I would maybe begin by emphasizing is if I can be allowed to retreat into theory for a moment.
Please, on the show always.
So there's, in the history of Marxist theorizations of imperialism, right? There's a dominant, I think, or a more conventional, let's say, approach, that's coming out of, or let's say dominant, that's coming out of Lenin and others, that will emphasize that when capitalism hits a profitability crisis in the core, right? So whether it's the United States or European countries, if once their firms hit a crisis of profitability where there's a market saturation or the capital-labor relationship in a core only allows, you cannot reinvest profits anymore to generate even further profits, that capitalism will will intensify imperialism, but will also turn to financialization, which we talked about with the oil-dollar relationship, right? This was the financialization of the US economy. This was the financialization of the world economy, through which, in the absence of being able to renew and generate further profits in the real economy, right, because of declining competitiveness for the US, but also rising competitiveness elsewhere, the contradictions of capitalism reaching a limit of profitability, there's a turn to finance, right? But there's a second road, which is what you're pointing to, that Rosa Luxemburg actually first pointed to, as far as I'm aware. And I think Ali Kadri's work, and I think Ali also has, Ali Kadri has recently co-authored a piece with somebody who's been on your program recently, Matteo Capasso, a couple of, they wrote a very important
Shout out
piece.
to Matteo if you're watching.
Yeah,
and if you're not, what the hell are you doing?
Shout out to Comrade Matteo for
Comrade
sure.
Matteo.
Yeah, brilliant analysis always. But yes, I also had co-written a piece with Ali Kadri on this specific theme. So I know they have engaged Luxembourg somewhat, but in her book, I think The Accumulation of Capital, she has an entire chapter there on militarism as a province of accumulation, which is getting at exactly what you're saying. She's looking at how war doesn't simply become a means to grabbing resources, that war is the end in itself, that when you hit a profitability crisis, right, when the contradictions of the capital-labor relation cannot be overcome, when the contradictions of inter-firm competition, of inter-imperialist competition or whatnot cannot be overcome, turning to war actually becomes a way in which accumulation can be renewed within the sphere of war itself, right? Because you can generate a kind of social buy-in by all peoples, from working classes to the capitalist class. A total collective social effort is bought into a war-making project that enables massive amounts of profits to be regenerated, right? So war becomes an escape from the crisis of profitability as well for Luxembourg. And I think this is something that Kadri's work with Matteo has emphasized, and I think so it becomes a means of profit, not just to grab copper, not just to grab oil, but to actually make a profit, because you can't make profits elsewhere. And we know that since the 1970s, not only has the US economy financialized, right, that it has essentially become really centered, whatever productive basis there is to the US economy is tied with the military industry, right? So there has been both a financialization and a militarization of US capital accumulation since the 1970s, and it is more broad amongst Western capitalist countries themselves, right? And this is particularly becoming sharp as China and other contending states further intensify the crisis of their competitive basis in the global economy, right? So I think that militarized sphere of accumulation has been key as well to the financialized sphere since the 1970s. And the West Asian region, the Middle Eastern region, has been a key site, as Kadri's work has shown, through which war has become a key profit-making arena. And now Kadri will also emphasize there that part of the objective of war is to smash these societies as well, right? So you smash the capacity of the Libyan or Syrian states to engage in some form of non-market-based social reproduction of its societies, which ends up actually imposing levels of destruction, which release forms of surplus labor that can have the impact of depressing labor costs more generally across the world, which can, again, enhance profits, right? So I think most definitely it's important that we keep up front and center that these wars, whether it's the war in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, in Ukraine, that there is a fundamental structural impetus coming out of the US economy to continue to pump and push for war making as an arena of profit making. And the West Asian region has been key to that. So I would just say, in addition to the financialization component we talked about, militarization has been key to the maintenance and reproduction of US capitalist accumulation since the 1970s in particular.
Wow, that's like a really, it kind of blows my mind when you put it all like that, that war is a resource. War has become a resource because of the profitability of it and this disgusting war machine that has become so foundational to the West's ability to continue to profit off of the world. I want to move on to a couple other regional issues that are obviously very much related to the genocide in Gaza. I want to talk about Iran and the resistance axis. And I don't know if you saw, but I recently was able to go on Piers Morgan.
I did see that. And well done. You did awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. It was very, very stressful, by the way. It was a very stressful experience. So I'm happy with
it seems very stressful.
That it turned out in a way where, you know, it was at least some sort of like cathartic experience for people to watch these Zionists get yelled at by me. But
genocide apologists, that was good.
Genocide apologists, exactly. These genocide apologists. But there was this one Israeli American woman called Emily, and you might remember that she made this claim, and she made it repeatedly. Seriously, sitting through this was like a form of torture to have to just listen to these people's insane talking points. But she kept saying that Iran is a colonizer. She was trying to use the words colonizer and imperialist. She tried to say that I don't know what they mean, and she does. And that it's actually Iran that's colonizing Lebanon, and it's an imperialist power in the region. And I mean, she sounded insane, but there are people who believe this because it's said so often about Iran. Like Iran is like there's this term like sub-imperialism that some sort of like a certain strain of people in the like left sphere will use when referring to a country like Iran. But
I would also say too, because people point to like Lenin's writings to talk about like World War I as an inter-imperialist conflict. They'll use that Lenin analysis now to be like, this is why you shouldn't support Russian imperialism or Iranian imperialism today. But that is a case also is where it's like that analysis is of its time, and we're here now 100 years in the future with the greatest imperialist power like ever created in human history. And you can't reasonably make this argument, and you could make it in the early 20th century about inter-imperialist rivalries. But like, there's no rivalry. You have one major imperialist power that's the largest, most destructive, and most hegemonic imperialist power, you know, in history, versus anything that's kind of remotely challenging that. You know? So people will try to use this kind of like ultra leftist stance to talk about why we can never possibly support, even critically support, a place like Russia or Iran or wherever else. But I think like that analysis made perfect sense at the time, but is completely lacking today with the reality of what the United States has become and what Western imperialism led by the United States. It's exciting. We got the actual Karl Marx in the chat. Fantastic.
You know, Israel supporters do like to like project, you know, Israel's colonialism and imperialism onto Iran and say it's Iran that's imperialist, it's Iran that's colonizing Lebanon. But, you know, I want to emphasize, Bikram, and you know this as an academic, that these words have actual meanings. Like imperialism and colonialism they both have a definition. So can you explain to our viewers why Iran does not qualify?
See, Kerm, I don't really agree with that. Russia wants a bigger stake for itself. I mean, maybe you might want to make that case, but I think the reason that Russia invaded Ukraine wasn't because Russia just decided one day to take Ukraine because they wanted to just take those regions. Like, again, if it was about the flow of capital, if it's about impoverishing those areas so they could be more rich, you could make this case maybe. But I don't think Russia invaded Ukraine for that reason. I think Russia invaded Ukraine because the United States and Canada and its allies were pumping weapons into Ukraine for years, politically interfering in Ukraine for years, and they said repeatedly, "Stop doing this. Stop doing this. Stop pumping weapons into Ukraine. Stop bringing the CIA in to train these militias. Stop bombing this region filled with Russian people in Ukraine, or we're going to have to do something." And then eventually they did. I think that's the primary reason. Russia needs to keep NATO out of Ukraine to preserve its own stake. Yeah, well, I think what you're describing is something that's defensive. You know? And that's not really protecting their own stake, but it's protecting themselves from, their former closest ally and the location that's launched every single invasion into Russia throughout history, becoming a glorified NATO base. I think what you're doing right now, they're defending a project. And listen, I'm not a huge fan of Putin or like certain things that the Russian government does, but you're kind of creating an equivalence here between the imperialist power of America and the West and the rules-based order versus Russia, and there's really no comparison. I think you're creating kind of a false equivalency.
An imperialist, let alone colonial power.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to understand, say, colonialism and imperialism, right? It's very clearly these are two, and just I think maybe for your viewers and listeners, I recently gave a lecture at Middle East Critique where I think I go into this in a lot more detail. Like it's a very long kind of lecture where if
I don't think it is exactly the same class
longer definitions, but very briefly, like colonialism and imperialism is a set of relationships through Russia, which either colonizing power or an imperial power is going to organize and dominate
as well to actual counter Western hegemony. They're allying with the largest socialist project in the world today, even if they themselves are not socialist yet.
The colonized society, the subjugated society, in a way that denies sovereignty to those people in order to transfer resources and surplus value from the colonized, imperially subjugated zone into the colonizer country or into the imperial core, right? So that's, I think, very key. It's not enough to say that if one country has a relationship with another through which they are maybe engaged in some forms of relations of power, or they're engaged in some forms of military collaboration or cooperation, or engaged in a conflict in a neighboring country, that automatically qualifies as colonialism and imperialism. That is a very simplistic rendering, right? I think one thing that I often emphasize is like, look to see, does the relationship between these two countries, does it generate relations of development and underdevelopment? Does it generate relations through which, say, Iran's presence somewhere is actively underdeveloping that country, is actively de-developing and destroying the productive basis of that country in order to transfer wealth from that country to Iran? Where can you find that? You can't find that anywhere, right? So I think that definition of surplus value transfer of a militarized or economic basis to a denial of sovereignty that is done to transfer wealth from periphery to core, from colonized to colonizer, we can't see that with the case of Iran. And what I will further emphasize is that the Iranian Revolution in 1979 is itself a response to the colonization of Iran, to the imperial subjugation of Iran, the neo-colonial subjugation of Iran. Iran was the case par excellence in the 20th century of neo-colonial subjugation. And the relations we were talking about over US imperialism being premised upon domination over the flow of oil into and out of the region. The coup that happens in Iran in 1953 is a very key part of that project. And the Iranian Revolution in 1979, why does it become so threatening to US imperialism, is because, in my view, it is actually a direct challenge to that 1974 US-Saudi relationship. Because the Iranian Revolution does not it stands with Palestinians from its inception. It's never abandoned the Palestinian cause. It's been given opportunities to abandon it. If the Iranians abandoned Palestine, you can bet in one day they would be integrated into the region, right? That all of this discourse around rights and democracy and all this stuff, this is not anything that has ever been a concern. We know this to the West. So if they would have abandoned Palestine and accepted U.S. hegemony, you know, Iran could be integrated into the region by the U.S. in a day. Those opportunities have been there. But from the Iranian Revolution, you can see the Iranian Revolution, and shout out to my haters. You know, there's a lot of Zionists who are always like, "Oh my gosh, he said the Iranian Revolution is premised upon expelling the U.S. from the region." Like, wow, that's a big controversial claim to make. But just to restate this point,
I think the revolution says as much too.
Exactly. Even Stephen Walt
It's
or like these boring academics.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, all these boring academics have made this point, right? But so the Iranian Revolution is you know, it centers on a rejection and opposition to Zionism, but also the expulsion of U.S. imperialism from the region, understanding that there's no sovereignty to be had fully for Iranians or any people in the region while they are still there. So if you look at the history of Iran since 1979, whether one wants to be critical or supportive of any actions, what is very clear is the Iranian position is often informed in the immediate sense by its direct security imperatives in its border regions, right? Like that. And that's something you can apply also to China and Russia, right? You can see the way in which those states operate on a very different logic, through which they're not going to dominate and deny sovereignty in order to transfer surplus wealth from a periphery to a core. They're largely informed by security imperatives that are security imperatives in response to the actual imperialist power in these regions, which is the United States, right? So how does Iran operate in Iraq? Well, the Iranian presence in Iraq is going to be of a such to ensure that the United States can't go through Iraq and get to the doorstep of Iran, because we know that the next step is always regime change in Iran. Now, that's a very different logic than calling it an imperial or colonizing power, number one. But number two, Iran has been a very vital force to different resistance forces in the region. Now, that again, that's something that is a fact of the matter, right? Like, you cannot understand. I think Amal Saad's work is very important in saying that Hezbollah is not a proxy of Iran. It's not a pawn of Iran. These are allies in an axis. But Iran has been a core part of that axis, right? Like, it has been a core part of, just as Iran learned from North Korea how to develop an endogenous weapons production capacity, they have also helped to diffuse that knowledge across the region. So when you understand Yemen or Ansarullah or Hezbollah, how they've stood up as such sovereign forces that have endogenous force capacity, you know, Iran is a key part of that question, right? So it has been key to the challenge to U.S. imperialism in the region. It is certainly not operating according to the logics of imperialism and colonialism by any means. I think that's important to emphasize, which doesn't, again, that doesn't mean that any state doesn't have degrees of social discontent that people can analyze. None of that does away with that, but it's to be very clear as to what is and is not happening, and also to be clear of why Iran is targeted, right? Iran is targeted for the specific reason of how it challenges U.S. imperialism in the region.
Fantastic discussion as you. I want to get to Johnny's point here. Now that I'm finally not driving, a lot of people wind up campism where they support whoever's against America because of a fundamental misunderstanding of a critical fight of valid criticism. Support from criticism or as some sort of conversation. I guess my point is, like, when you talk about a place like Iran and having critical support for a place like the role that they're playing, talked about. You support Palestinians, but who's the country that's materially actually helping Palestinians fight right now? Well, it's Iran. And that's exactly what I was talking about the other day. You know, when there was that exchange of missiles between Israel and Iran, is that, like, it's not that there's not criticisms to be had about Iran or Russia, but it's just when they're playing this role in these kinds of conflicts, that's, I think, not the time to be bringing out your withering critiques. I just have to talk more closely into the microphone. Like, it's not that there's not criticisms to be had, but what I get confused by is when people take the moment, like when there's this military exchange between Iran and Israel, now it's time to bring out all our critiques. Now it's time to bring out our criticisms. You know? When NATO is funding a proxy war against Russia, now we got to make sure we're getting out all our critiques and criticisms. You know, it's not like there's not conversations to be had about this, but I kind of question the timing sometimes that people choose to talk about these these criticisms that they might have in these like important moments. I don't think it's super helpful or like meaningful to in those moments. Or Yemen is another example. Remember when the Yemen blockade was starting and I mentioned something about Yemen, people were bringing all this stuff about Yemen. You can't say anything positive about them. Don't you know that they are anti-Semites and they're homophobic and they're this and they're that and they're reactionary, fundamentalist, whatever. And it's like, okay, but right now they're materially trying to support, we claim to support Palestine. Yemen is materially supporting Palestinians. Iran is materially supporting Palestinians. So what is the purpose of now, in those moments, making sure we get at this criticism and making sure everyone hears how uncomfortable we are with anyone ever saying anything positive about this? I just don't think it's really useful or valuable. You touched on it earlier, but Pat and I have had the conversation regularly that the inconvenience of reality will always occur. There'll always be something any liberatory or revolutionary or XYZ movement will fall short or commit some heinous thing that can always be contextualized. It still happened, it's still worthy of support in spite of such events, but not heralded as some spotless record unblemished. Well, and that I think is the difference, Johnny, too, because like a lot of these patriotic socialists, for example, they kind of uphold Michael Parenti, but even in that speech that we watch often, he says not blindly, not unqualified. And there's a difference, I think, between like keeping your criticisms to yourself of like Russia or Iran or Yemen or China, wherever, in these crucial moments, and just becoming a flag-waving chauvinist for these places. You know, that I think is a big difference. The Jackson Hinkles of the world have just gone full-fledged Russia can do nothing wrong, Russian chauvinist approach, which I don't think is really valuable either, and I think in fact has some really like negative consequences on, you know, domestic conversations about these things. So I do think there's a fundamental difference here between not becoming full-fledged, uncritical, unapologetic supporters of any like anti-Western state. But that doesn't also mean, I also don't think that it's super useful, especially when these big moments are happening, to bring out all your academic, intellectualized critiques about these places. If that makes sense. Even thank you for doing the right thing this time would be better than just firing off a bullet list of problems that they have. I mean, yeah, it's purely like a sort of, it's kind of masturbatory in my opinion in those moments, you know? It's like self-congratulatory. It's none of our fucking business. Who are we to talk? It sounds absurd. Well, it does, yeah. It's like, especially when these places like Iran or Yemen specifically are materially supporting Palestine, you know? We claim to support Palestine, and when Yemen or Iran meaningfully, materially supports Palestinians and their ability to actually fight, all of a sudden now it's the time to make sure everyone understands that we have this big critique of whatever policy or whatever cultural phenomena that we find distasteful. I like to be aware of these things because someone will bring these things up, and if they're legit, I think it allows you to, the ability to understand why these things happen and humanize these movements. I think that's pretty reasonable, Johnny. That's pretty reasonable. This VJ conversation does seem very good, but it's quite long, so I don't think we can take a look at it. Here's the link to the Breakthrough News piece with Rania there and Bikram Gill. Really fantastic conversation as usual. Please make sure you like and share and subscribe all their content because it's really terrific. I do have to get going in a couple minutes, folks. I'm at 6 out of 35 subs for the day. It's been a shorter stream. I understand that. I've tried to get through a bunch of things. But if you can, please subscribe to the program. Help me make the number go up a little bit. Help support the work that I do on here. Help support the community. Yeah, I got to go in about 10 minutes max. So you do one final, just take the last 10 minutes of the stream for this call to action here. Try to get people to support this program. The only way that I'm able to keep doing this show each and every day, folks, is if people subscribe and support the work that I do on here. I certainly appreciate it a lot. If you can, help me make the little number go up. In terms of the monthly leaderboards, we've got Risk Inverse at 30 this month. We got Talks to All with 20. We have Comrade Bushy at 16. Who knows if they can be overcome? You could find yourself on the leaderboard for today or the rest
We
of the
simply
month.
use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Little numbers.
Thank you, DJ Chimp. I appreciate the 200 bits. Thank you. How about some Joe Biden? I'm going to be streaming for Memorial Day on Monday, at least for a little while. My kid's got a dentist appointment. I'm going to have to leave at like 2:30, so maybe on Monday I can like get started earlier. Not sure. And if it's the parenting stuff really does make things a little difficult, especially this summer. Does this do anything for you?
Cover here, but I look to Dr. Sherwood. Are we moving?
Joe Biden, wake up. Joe Biden, wake up. 9/11.
One of the things that I strongly believe is
Joe Biden, wake up.
I should probably go home. I'm tired.
Joe Biden, wake up.
Joe. I'm tired.
Joe Biden.
What's happening?
Joe Biden, 9/11.
What's happening? Joe. Hello, Mr. President. Wake up.
You should have to pay nearly $6,400 more than you would today.
That was indeed pretty good. Good. It's really amazing that, like, with everything, the whole Trump era and everything that happened in 2015, 2016, Hillary and everything, the whole 4 years of Trump, it is really funny that Joe Biden ended up being the president. Like, that's, man, no, that's just crazy. It was really one of the last big predictions. Like, when I started doing this kind of podcasting and like paying attention to the whole primary and everything, 0% chance this, look at this, 0% chance Joe Biden, Joe Brandon, be unbelievable. Folks, I got about another 5 minutes. And fortunately, only 29 subs to go. Only 29 subs to go to get to the goal. That's barely anything. It's within reach. If you can, please do subscribe to this program. Help me escape today without completely humiliating myself. And I told you it was going to be shorter. You know, I got started late. I can't stick around. I get it. But help me get out of here without totally humiliating myself. Surely that can be a goal, right? That can be a goal. Claiming rib as a dependent. You should do that. So do any other fine individuals and wonderful folks, brave heroes, want to support this program that I do every single day, here on twitch.tv, which some people seem to enjoy. I don't know. Some people seem to enjoy it. Don't ask me why. Keep forgetting to purchase a TRRS shirt. They're on sale. Very cool. I did not realize. Got new merch as well. And new merch drops on there. Sick. It's okay.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Joe, thank you for the gift. I appreciate that, Joe. Thank you. Very, very cool.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all
Dr.
this.
Maggot as well. Thank you for pitying me. The lowest form of Twitch sub call to action. Just play on the user's sense of shame and pity. It's like the dirtiest trick in the game. It's the final resort of the desperate streamer. Thank you, Dr. Maggot, and thank you, Joe. The gifted sub. That's very cool. Call him Dirty Rib. Do they call me that? Don't worry. Fortunately, I got other big, like, serious career things lined up if this ever doesn't work out. If this ever doesn't work out, I got big career moves to do, so who cares, right?
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
It's not like I'm stuck here or anything. Crackle Bear, thank you so much for the 5 good subs. That's very, very kind of you. I very much appreciate that, Crackle Bear. Very, very cool. Rob's Fox News pivot is waiting in the wings. That's exactly right. Exactly. People are just lining up to hire this guy. Believe me. I gotta go. Still, obviously, it would be wonderful to get some more subs, of course, but I do have to get going to go pick up my kid from school. Surely they're on their way in. I agree, Joe. I agree. What, only 22 more to go? In only like a minute. Should be no problem. Should be no problem at all. Believe me, folks, I appreciate every single person that tunes in to watch this show and supports this show. In case that's not ever clear. Thank you for tuning in today. I'll be back tomorrow with more of a full-length... Tomorrow, Friday?
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I'll be back tomorrow for a full-length stream. Thanks, Anon, for the gift to actual Karl Marx. Incredible. Actual Karl Marx. How exciting that is. It is Friday. I'll be here for a full-length stream tomorrow. It's also my birthday coming up. Not next week, but the following Monday. Everyone save your... whatever. It is my birthday, though. Coming up. Huh? See you tomorrow.